Welcome everyone to another episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. As always, we're here to keep you up to date with the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing. And as always, my co-host is a man on a mission to demystify digital marketing. He's the host of the Content Marketing Studio video podcast. Please welcome Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you so much. I've said it before, but this is the highlight of my week, spending time with a man who is also on a mission to keep marketing simple. The voice of the Marketing and Finance podcast and the host of the award-winning 𝗏𝗏 video series, I Give You Monsieur Roger Edwards.
Oh, thank you so much, Pascal. And here we are with episode 65. 65. It feels like a milestone. I know it isn't, but 65 feels like a milestone for me.
Well, we tell our customers to always celebrate their small victories, not just the big ones. So I think we should go for 65. And I just mentioned a moment ago about Rod's vlog. I will, embarrass you right now in front of our audience, but you are fast approaching episode number 100 for Rod's vlog. And it's just such an achievement. Well done.
Do you know, it was so good to watch episode number 1, because episode number 1 of Rod's vlog was, you were in that, and our good friend Richard Tubb was in that as well. And it's nearly 5 years ago since I did the first episode of Rod's vlog, and I travelled down to Newcastle to meet Richard and yourself. And we had a walk around town, we had lunch, we had dinner, we talked about films, we talked about marketing. It was a great day. And Rod's vlog was just a bit of an experiment then. And obviously, it's carried on, and I still love doing it. And yesterday, I put out episode number 98. So, yes, you're right. Nearly there at episode 100.
So,
I'll have to think of something interesting to do.
Is number 100 pretty much filmed or not yet?
No, absolutely not. No, they tend to, if I do store them up, it tends to be only 1 or 2 in advance. So maybe next week I'll have to think about what I'm going to do.
I was thinking maybe we should, Richard and I should come up to Edinburgh. And then you can film number 100 with, the two of us.
With the same stars, the same stars. But getting back on track, today, as always, we've got lots to talk about in Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast. And later in film marketing, we're going to be looking at the latest Scream film. Now, I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to call this Scream 5 or just Scream, but that's maybe something that we'll talk about when we get to the film marketing section. But before we get to film marketing, we've got to go through the other sections of the show, and we're going to start, as always, with In the News.
And we begin with Iceland, who's brought back the role of marketing director by promoting Casper Nelson to the position following almost 4 years at the supermarket.
The Advertising Standards Authority, the ASA, is taking out Instagram ads exposing 6 rule-breaking influencers who have consistently failed to disclose ads on their own accounts despite explicit warnings.
Well, according to a study of 1,000 people in the UK conducted this month, Roger, 58% have no idea what the metaverse is, and 96% of people aged 25 to 54 say that they have no plans to spend their cash in the virtual universe.
Microsoft has bought Activision Blizzard in a $68.7 billion, that's £50.5 billion deal that represents the biggest buyout ever seen in the gaming industry. It gives Microsoft control of gaming franchises including Call of Duty, Warcraft, and gives the Xbox platform an advantage over the rival Sony PlayStation.
Wow, well, Aldi has joined the race for the checkout-free experience with the opening of its first shop-and-go store. Located in Greenwich, London, the trial store has opened to the public after being used by Aldi staff over recent months.
Oatly has launched its biggest UK campaign to date about why eating a plant-based diet is going to be the norm in 2022, using the new Norm and Al Show, a mini-series of 5 episodes featuring 2 oat-drinking cartoon puppets named Norm and Al.
Well, Walker's has a new multi-million-pound campaign entitled Britain's Most Loved Crisps, bringing together its full range of snacks for the first time to remind customers about the brand's unique and diverse portfolio.
And finally, a new report from the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, the IPA, has identified 5 steps marketing practitioners can take to have better conversations around the role and impact of brand purpose. Now, Pascal, pretty much every single one of these news items is worthy of being of your time and my time to talk about. I found it very difficult today to focus in on just talking about three of them. I really did want to comment about the metaverse, but I'm gonna leave that because I've had enough rants about metaverses and NFTs over the last few weeks. So one of the themes, I guess, that's come up on the show a lot over our 65 episodes is this whole disappointing or diluting of the marketing discipline, and the fact that we're seeing, or we have seen, quite a few C-suite roles, marketing CMO roles, being effectively booted out of the boardroom. So what do you think about Iceland actually reinstating a marketing director role into their board structure?
Well, I was delighted that we should start with that news because you're right. This has been a kind of running theme and thread through the 65 episodes. This idea of the marketing discipline being demoted because actually of its own approach to the language, to some of the kind of relying on hacks and tricks and apps as opposed to strategy, and making a valuable contribution to the discussion of the C-suite. So what is disappointing, it feels like there's like a yo-yo effect of, we have a marketing director, then we don't, then we have one, then we don't. And I think really as a result of which you can't have, the results that you desire as a business. You can't have the consistency. So I think it's great news, but it does suggest still that there's still a lot of work to be done. As mentioned before, it's almost as though the discipline, the profession needs to almost present itself and re-energize its kind of belief by others in terms of their contribution to the success of a company. And it feels like it's been an ongoing battle for decades.
Yeah, and no doubt it is one that will continue, because I would absolutely guarantee that if I went back to Marketing Week or the consultancy website today, I'd be able to find a news item which said that a marketing director had left a company and won't be replaced, or something equally similar. So yes, you're right, it's a yo-yo effect, and I think that we've just got to keep banging the drum for marketing to regain the position in the boardroom and start to show its strategic credentials again. Now, Microsoft buying Activision
Yes.
Blizzard. You're a big gamer. You're probably a bigger gamer than me. I'm looking for a new game to play because Fortnite, since the latest update just before Christmas, has become almost unplayable. I've been able to log into it once in about the last month. It's just as buggy as hell now. So I'm not a massive gamer, you are. So tell me what you think about this purchase by Microsoft.
It's fascinating to see what's happened to the gaming industry, almost like marketing. If 10, 20 years ago you told somebody you're working in gaming, you were a game developer, or you were the head, a CEO of a gaming company, people would laugh at you saying, can you get a proper job? And here they are now, actually as an industry, in terms of employment, but also in terms of revenue, and by extension, what they provide back in terms of tax. It's actually one of the biggest industries in the world. And what we're seeing here is the same scenario that we saw with movies, which is about verticals. So what you want to do if you're Microsoft, or indeed if you are Sony, is to own titles that will secure the loyalty of the players. So this is a big deal because Microsoft obviously owns the Xbox platform, and actually they've done some pretty good stuff around voice activations and immersions and so on. And it's a bit like, Netflix, who would own the rights to a particular series or a product, and only if you have the Netflix kind of membership can you watch it. The same we have with Amazon Prime, with The Lord of the Rings. It's about owning what they call the IP, the property, to secure that kind of purchase from the customer. Another one would be Disney with the Marvel and Star Wars universe. So this is a big deal, not just in terms of the sheer amount of money. I mean, I didn't know that people had 50 billion, kind of slushing around in their petty cash. But this is about control, which is not necessarily a good thing, because that means that only those who have an Xbox or Microsoft account will be able to play Warcraft in the future, unless you have some arrangements with the other platforms. But yeah, I think it's it's an example of what is happening across other industries.
And I was very interested by this story about Aldi, the store in London, opening its first checkout free experience. Now, we've all been to the supermarket, doesn't matter whether it's Tesco or Morrison's or Sainsbury. You know, if it's a busy day, you'll get to the checkout and your heart will just fall, won't it, when you see everybody lined up with trolleys absolutely brimming with goods, and you know you're going to have to be standing in line for quite a while. Now, I've seen one of these stores in a vlog from an American travel vlogger, and there are quite a few of these in America, and effectively it uses all sorts of CCTV cameras, it uses sensors and this, that, and the other, and you quite literally walk in to the store, pick things off the shelf, and just walk out with them, and it remembers what you've bought, what you've picked up off the shelves, and it tallies it all up, and it charges it to your credit card or debit card, and Bob's your uncle. You've done it, and there's no queuing up to be done. Now, I absolutely applaud the idea of not having to queue up, but it's going to take a bit of getting used to, isn't it? I'm going to be feeling like I'm just walking in and stealing stuff. You know, I'll have some of that. I'll have some of that. I'll have some of that. And then it's only when you get out and presumably your mobile phone beeps to tell you what the actual total of your bill was that you actually realise that you have actually paid and you haven't become a shoplifter.
I actually thank you for correcting me, because I still believe that somehow that you would maybe scan the barcodes on your mobile phone. So my idea was that you'd be free of any of the in-store systems, but there's still an element of you having to scan and almost educate the system that you're buying the item. Because that means, for example, let's say, I put a tin of baked beans in my basket, but then I put it back on the shelf, so the system will be able to track what it's like to be a shopper when you change your mind or you forget something. I think for me the whole idea about honesty is a tricky one, because you and I, with the other extreme, will feel like we are shoplifters, and then you've got the real shoplifters. So how is that going to work? But clearly they've done a test for several months with the staff. I'm sure they did scenario planning and that kind of thing. So perhaps that should be an entry in one of your Rog vlogs, you going to a Shop and Go store and tell the story.
And maybe they'll actually have a proper checkout for shoplifters to queue up at. That'll be quite interesting. But no, this vlog that I saw of of these stores in America, these people tried to break the system. So they were doing exactly what you were saying. They were taking a tin of beans off the shelf, wandering around with it for 10 minutes, and then taking it and putting it back on the shelf. And in this particular vlog that I watched, the system recognized what they were doing. It's not like you go into a hotel minibar and you accidentally nudge a can of Coke. It doesn't come out the fridge, but you nudge it and it charges you for it. So obviously technology has come quite a long way. So I'm not going to rush down to London just to try out the Aldi.
Fair enough. Maybe when you have an event. Can I ask you about walkers? So well, to begin with, confession time. I don't really like crisps much. I'm more of a kind of charcuterie and cooked meat kind of guy for my appetizers, but I will have tortilla chips. But so I'm aware of walkers. I mean, crikey, they take the lion's share of TV advertising and so on with some celebrities. But when I read the item, about this idea of a unique and diverse portfolio, I thought, I wonder, so how many types of walkers crisps are there? And when I looked at it, I was absolutely gobsmacked, literally. 141 different types of Walker's products, crisp-based product. That's a marketing nightmare, isn't it?
They've got loads, and they also do lots of special flavors. So, like, they may tie it into the football league, and they'll have different flavors based upon which teams are in the final and things like that. And they'll create special recipes and special flavors to coincide with certain days of the year. So they're constantly putting stuff out. And one of the things when I go abroad, one of my favorite styles of crisps that you can get in Spain, in France, and in the USA is called Lay's. Lays, Lay's. And it's only recently that I realized that Lay's is the same as Walker's.
Oh, right.
And if you actually look at the package, apart from the word Walker's and the word Lay's, it is actually the same shapes and branding and colours. It's just that for whatever reason, in the UK they're called Walkers, and everywhere else in the world they're called Lay's. It's a bit like Starburst and Opal Fruits. Maybe eventually everything will switch back and they'll be called Lay's across the entire world. But yeah, it's a phenomenal house of brands, isn't it?
It is, and I'm just realizing we are recording this podcast near lunchtime. I'm getting quite pecky when I'm talking about all this.
Well, let's move on then, Pascal, and then lunch will become a little bit nearer. So let's move on to the next section of the show, which is always one of my favourites, and that is the content spotlights. In this section of the show, Pascal and I bring to the table an item of content. It could be a video, it could be a blog, it could be a podcast, and we dissect it and share it. So, Pascal, what have you got for me this week?
So this week it's a video, and a rather special one, and I chose it because I want to talk to you about a number of things. I want to talk about storytelling, I want to talk about hybrid events, I want to talk about tech and the future of life and work. Now, every January there is an event taking place in the US called the Consumer Electronics Show, CES. I'd learned recently that it started in 1967, which is quite extraordinary. And this year they went ahead with the event, which was, I think, cancelled last year. If not, gone, it was online only. And they went for a hybrid event where people could go to Las Vegas and look at the exhibitions, talk to the traders, and small and large. But there was also a large amount of content shared virtually via the internet, of course. And I picked just one example amongst many, because I think for you and I, for viewers and listeners, it's also a wonderful example of what we mean by hybrid, what we mean by storytelling. And this is from LG Electronics, who literally organized themselves as though they were creating a movie premiere. They call it a world premiere. And in half an hour, they packed so much content, information, but also storytelling, that it is, very much deserving of that kind of Hollywood experience. They even had John Legend doing a song for them and everything. So the half-hour kind of mini documentary, you could argue, is called The Better Life You Deserve, and that's a theme through. So to begin with, I wanted to share with you the structure of this kind of visual experience. So it began with an opening statement from the CEO of LG Electronics, William Cho, who really in 3 minutes really managed to capture all the key messages and delivered, what you would expect. And I thought there was a lesson in there in terms of short, sharp messages, but really well crafted. And introducing the theme of this video, which was around a tech supporting your personal life, tech supporting inclusivity and mobility, and tech supporting energy saving and becoming a more sustainable nation, really. And then they had a structure which was, you had a short film, which was almost like mimicking a America's sitcom of a family and going through their day-to-day. And after the short film, they had what they called a product showcase, where the product team would give you more information and expand upon what you saw in the film. So it was A Better Life for You was part one, you could argue. A Better Life for All was part two, and A Better Life Tomorrow was part three. All this essentially using the 3-act structure of The Better Life You Deserve. And the short film followed the story of Ellie, a young mum, who is in A Better Life for You, busy cooking meals for the family, and gets a visit from the neighbor Carol. And Carol essentially is a protagonist who is wondering what is all this tech, and Ellie explaining to her what happens. And it's done in a very kind of tongue-in-cheek way, and doesn't take itself too seriously, but really it's engaging. I mean, I found myself watching the 5-minute movie and not realizing that time has passed, and then you're introduced to the more traditional way of showcasing your products. But there was one example, and I thought of you because I know that you love cooking as well. So she's preparing a meal, and she has bought the products obviously online via the fridge store, because that's what you will do in the future. And what she was able to do was to scan the barcode of the product on the mobile phone, and that automatically switched on the oven at the right temperature and for the right duration. It also downloaded the recipe, did all sorts of things. But as Ellie is with her neighbor Carol go around the house, you go to the gaming room, you go to the laundry room, and so on, and you're being introduced, of course, to LG products. But it was just a very interesting way to go about it as opposed to just standing up on stage and going through a bunch of slides and demonstration. So in the Better Life for All Part 2, Ellie visits her parents, who are from a obviously more older age group, and there would see the LG products in and around the elderly. Looking at convenience, mobility, and a number of things, but also Ellie's parents are very, very energy conscious, and they're using products to actually save energy and the environment, but also this idea of inclusivity. What can we do to support the aging population? And then in the Better Life tomorrow, we discover that Ellie is a singer, and she's going to record a video, and we're introduced to essentially the set of the future with all matter of automation and a very, very exciting kind of product, which is also that others are doing beyond LG, which is the pod, which is essentially your car that will drive itself automatically to different part of the city or the venue, or maybe part of the airport and so on. And it's like this kind of comfortable bubble with everything you'll want to be very comfortable whilst the vehicle is going from A to B. And I would invite people to watch them. They're great fun. They go very, very fast, and then you can watch the product showcase. And then, of course, we close with the CEO of LG Electronics coming back for the closing statements. And all that packed in half an hour. I just thought it was really, really well made. It was a good example of storytelling. And please, people, don't dismiss it. Just because you don't have the resources and budget of LG, you could do the same thing. You could simply grab your phone and tell the story, in the same manner. But also, it's about, I think, the precision. There was not one word, not one phrase that was just, extra. Everything was very, very tightly pulled together. And it's just a wonderful way to do a hybrid. I'll just close very quickly with a bit of a complaint about the media. So CES 2022 went ahead with a hybrid, event format, and the media went all out to dismiss the event as being a failure because not many people went there physically, as opposed to celebrating the fact that this was a successful hybrid event. Now, you and I have been championing hybrid events and everything that comes with it for quite some time, and it feels as though there's a long way to go for people to actually understand it, respect it, and approve of it.
And that's the same media, Pascal, that in another breath would castigate people for breaking lockdowns and spreading the virus around. So, sometimes, I've worked with the media so much during my career, and I still like PR. I still think PR is one of the most exciting parts of the marketing mix. But yes, sometimes the media can drive you absolutely insane with their agendas. My item this week, Pascal, is another article from Fast Company, the website, and this is written by a gentleman called Brian Scordato. The headline is "The Surprising Way to Beat the Only Thing Your Brain is Hardwired to Hold You Back On." Now, I love this article because it tells a story. So Brian tells the story of how he was at a cocktail party and he got talking to a lady who was very high up in an investment company, and he sort of asks her to give him a snippet of what is the one thing that has made you the success that you are. And this lady immediately hits him back by saying, "Sell the position." And she explains, and she was working as a high-up person in this investment company. And every day she would have meetings with the investment people in her team, and they would agonize sometimes over some of the stocks that weren't performing, some of the stocks and shares that weren't showing a return. And then they'd make a decision one by one as to whether they should keep it or let it go. And sometimes she would have to listen to the excuses that the fund managers were giving about that sector of the market isn't performing as well, but maybe we should hang on to it a bit longer, etc., etc. And that's pretty much what all investment companies do. Every day they'll review the stocks and go through this process. And this woman said, it was fine, it worked, but we were always middle of the pack. And then one day, she just pretty much got sick of this whole process, and she decided to change it and say instead, okay, let's just sell it. Sell the position. If we're not happy, sell it. Wait until the next day, and then ask ourselves whether we would buy it back. And since she changed that strategy, they have become top tier. And Brian then goes on to say that this was a bit of a revelation for him because at the time he was putting a lot of his time and resource into trying to get an app out there into the market and to launch it and hopefully for it to become successful. But that app was actually in a part of the market which was already quite saturated with other apps. So he took the decision, I'll sell it, and then the following day decide, would I buy it back? And of course the answer was no, and that freed him up to go off and work on some much more successful ventures. And I think that it's a simple idea, and of course you might sell something at the wrong time, and this is not investment advice, of course, but I do think that all of us, and I find that I'm guilty of this, we do hang on to things, don't we? We'll have projects that we keep batting away at that might not be going well, or we have maybe even customers that just aren't working, and we have other projects that just aren't working, but we keep at it because we think we'll turn it round, we'll make it work. But sometimes you've just got to let these things go. And this article almost sort of gives you permission to say, if I was to let it go for a day almost, and then ask myself, will I buy it back if there's a monetary value? It's chances are you'd probably let it go for good. And I think that perhaps in this busy world that we live in, where we do get involved in so many things, Pascal, it may be time to sit down and make this call and say, no, I'm selling that. And you'll find that you'll actually not want to buy it back. What do you think of that as an idea?
I like it a lot, and I think your timing is impeccable because we are still at the early stages of 2022, and it is important to cut back, to call, to demote projects and so on. And I wonder whether it's also one that needs to be done with others, as part of a mastermind group maybe, or as part of a team effort, because you're right, we might not be the best judge sometimes for what needs to go. It's a bit like video editing, isn't it, in a way, whereby there's a scene or there's a project, to take your term, that actually you enjoy doing, but actually, if you were to be honest, it's not providing you with value for the business or for the objectives you have in place. And I think it is part of good management. It is part of being a leader, even though you might be on your own, which is to take stock, and that's why those board meetings exist to a point, although I've been on good, bad, and ugly meetings, as you have as well, whereby the directors almost step away from the emotional engagement and investment. They kind of go, is this supporting our vision, yeah or nay? And they may decide to divest, which is sometimes why then you have to have good communication with the rest of the troops, because they may not have understood your own deliberation. But the reason why I'm saying your timing is impeccable, because I recently made a bit of a list of all the things I've got going, and it's a bit too much, I'll be honest with you, Roger, particularly around content creation, and I need to kind of reduce that list. But again, each time I make the decision that, for example, that blog will go or that video series will go, then there's that anguish, of but will I miss it or whatever? And maybe what you need is do what you do, which is, well, if you stop for a month or for a week, would you start again or not? Or if you, like I said, if you sold it in the case of business activities, would you buy it off the competition again? Because in fact, it is very important to you. So now, once again, what is surprising, perhaps shouldn't be surprising anymore, with content spotlights, it's often the shorter articles that gives us the most to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, even this, it just gets you thinking. I'm the same as you. I've got my podcast, I've got Rog you've mentioned that today already, other things. And, eventually you have to start to say to yourself, which of these ones is genuinely adding value to my business and to my mental health and well-being, I guess, as well, and which ones could I actually let go? So yeah, a salutary lesson for us both. So Pascal, it's probably time for us to shift the conversation into more technical areas. Do you fancy talking about some marketing tech and apps? So Pascal, tell me about the marketing tech and apps that you've discovered this week.
So this week's about really using the power of video content and video marketing to your advantage. And I want to talk to you about two platforms and two solutions. The first one is called Vocal Video. They actually got in touch with me, well, with many others, not just me on my own, a couple of years ago. And once again, they've made such progress. I'm so excited for them that I wanted to give them a bit of an inclusion as part of Marketing Tech and Apps. So Vocal Video is a all-in-one system to help you gather video testimonials, which is a really important part of your video marketing strategy. And the platform, which I've trialed, literally is a dashboard that helps you from start to finish to craft those video testimonials and get them embedded onto your website. The team at Vocal Videos worked very hard. I can tell behind the scenes. The kind of refresh website looks exciting. The storytelling and how they can take you step by step on what they can do for you is very, very clear, very engaging. And the way it works is literally you have an account, you have a dashboard, and you manage your communication, which I think that's what it's all about. And you and I have tried, and we have encouraged people to capture video testimonials. But what Vocal Video is doing is allowing your customers and your champions to do it in their own time, in their own environment, using their own mobile phone, which I think takes away some of the nervousness and sometimes some of the imposition. And then with a dashboard, you can therefore manage the communication going out. You can manage the receiving of the videos. You can then edit the videos, put your branding, and do more things. So just using their strapline, get amazing video testimonials from anyone, anywhere, automatically. So that's Vocal Video. The next one is another company that's forgotten about, but once again, because it's the time of year to get lots of email communication, which I don't mind so much, a company called Premium Beat. And they were bought, if I'm not mistaken, many years ago by Shutterstock. And I discovered through one of their kind of posts on social media that they have a library of free resources. And I was thinking of you. The library of free video assets, it's so extensive that you'll find what you need, as well as others out there for your next work. Transitions, special effects, overlays, and so on. Anything you'll need for your next visual storytelling. And I'm talking like literally in the hundreds of free video assets and elements. Now, it's part of their content marketing, granted, so that if you use their free products, you may want to use and subscribe to the other ones. But between Premium Beat for your existing and future activities, and Vocal Video as a focused kind of video testimonial strategy, that's a very, very good way to get started in 2022.
Fantastic stuff. I really like the Vocal Video idea, Pascal. That's really good. So when I was working in big corporate, as marketing director, and in fact, throughout my entire career, from when I was marketing assistant to marketing director, the one part of the job which absolutely used to drive me insane was projects. I just couldn't get my head around projects, and it was always good when I could delegate the project management to somebody who knew what they were doing about project management. But there was a running joke that always used to go on about my lack of tolerance for the mechanics of project management, because every time anybody brought out a Gantt chart, I would almost sort of make the same sort of sounds and huff and puffs that I make when people mention NFTs these days. I just had this almost like natural phobia of Gantt charts, and I can think of hours and hours and hours spent in meetings looking at these pieces of paper with these lines on and dependencies and dates, start dates and end dates, and it used to absolutely drive me insane. Funnily enough, therefore, I've actually picked a few apps this week which allow people to create those sorts of charts, those sorts of things for their projects, and I just stumbled across this because somebody did ask me about project workflow, and it's genuinely not something I've really ever researched into. And I actually came down to 3 apps which actually look to me as if they make this process painless for people like me who absolutely hate it. And the 3 that I've homed in on are Monday.com, and I just like the name of that, Manic Monday, Blue Monday, whatever you want to call it, and the website is fresh and it's easy to navigate. And then there's another one called Gantt Pro, which they've sort of it's orientated more towards professionals and students, and I guess it's just the signography, the icons, and the language they've used appeals to that group. And then the third one is Team Gantt, which actually I thought looked the best to me, and maybe that's because they genuinely say it's geared towards small businesses. Team Gantt. So check those out if, like me, you absolutely have to manage projects, but project management isn't your favorite thing to do, and you recoil from the side of from the site of Gantt charts. These websites, these apps might actually help you break through that phobia that you have.
Now, that's smashing. I mean, I knew Monday.com, but I didn't know the others. And I must say, I've only been involved in Gantt charting, if there's such a term, when I was in corporates. The moment I left, and set up my own business and work with small organizations, there was no need for them. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we used to change the first letter of Gantt from G to C. Now, I'm not actually going to say it, but you know what it will sound like if we actually did that. So, Pascal, once again, some really interesting marketing tech and apps and stuff there. Now it's time to set the controls of the TARDIS, fire up the flux capacitor, switch on the time circuits. Let's head back in time for this week in history.
In 1862, a young Thomas Edison, aged 15, becomes the first publisher of a newspaper produced and sold on a moving train. His weekly Grand Trunk Herald was a single news sheet with adverts from his father's store and local news he received via telegraphy.
In 1966, the then Soviet Union successfully lands their unmanned spacecraft Lunik 9 on the Ocean of Storms. This was the first controlled landing on the moon and the third lunar expedition for the Russians.
Wow, well, in 1972, the first scientific handheld calculator was introduced by Hewlett-Packard for $395. It was named the HP35 for having 35 keys and was the first handheld calculator able to perform logarithmic and trigonometric functions with one keystroke.
In 1986, Pixar Animation Studios, which were behind Toy Story and The Incredibles, headed by Edwin Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith, is spun off from a Lucasfilm as an independent production company with the backing of Steve Jobs.
Wow, I wonder if they regretted that somehow.
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely right. So, Pascal, what do you think about Thomas Edison becoming a publisher?
I mean, that's just genius. At the age of 15. Now, here's the story. That's why it made me laugh so much, and that's why I wanted to include it. So, he's a young lad. He's obviously doing a number of things. He's very curious. I'm sure he's already broken everything that his parents own to understand how it works. But then he's given the job to begin with to sell newspapers and food and sweets. But he's only earning essentially a fee of sort. He said, I can make more money to sell my own stuff, and particularly my dad's stuff. So he set up a printing room in the carriage designated for baggages. He found a corner and created a printing room so he could literally create on the day that single news sheet, but he would receive the information through the telegraph, and therefore the travelers could, if they left in the morning and then came back maybe in the evening from where they traveled, may have something very different. So this idea of recency, of immediacy, but also driven by this idea of, actually, I'm only earning a fee based on selling someone else's product. I'm going to create my own product, my own newspaper, and indeed sell my dad's stuff first by putting the adverts in the newspaper at the age of 15.
Yeah. I mean, I used to, when I was that age, I used to go to the paper shop and buy these little red memo books, which were about, half A5 size, and they had these red covers off, and I'd rip the red covers off and make about 3 different little booklets out of that one book. So each book probably had about 16 pages in, and then I used to write these little comics about a space hero called Rod Roden, and I used to draw the covers, and so I think it's a great way for youngsters to just show their creativity and just look at what Thomas Edison did. That's fantastic. And I was also interested in this story about the scientific handheld calculators, because again that triggered a memory from school days. Now I'm thinking I was in senior school, the 5 years of senior school in the UK, and that would have been between, I think, about 1979 and 1984. And in 1979, calculators were sort of starting to become a thing. So that's why I was a bit surprised that this was even earlier in 1972. But I remember our maths teacher, who was a really big guy called Mr. Brailsford. He was absolutely against calculators because you had to be able to work out everything in your head, and you had to be able to write it down and show your workings out. And we had to look up logarithms and trigonometry values in logbooks and trigonometry books and all of that sort of thing. But over the period of that 5 years, from 79 to 84, of course, calculators started to get smaller. They did start to get more and more keys on them. And by the time I did my O-levels in 1984, we were allowed to use calculators in our maths. Even in the exams, we were allowed to use calculators, but we still had to write down the workings out to show that we actually knew the process we had to go
Yeah.
through. So it was absolutely fascinating to think that, that was at that time that this technology was coming in. And of course, now we've all got calculator apps on our mobile phones that we probably very rarely use. But in those days, they were like bricks with millions of tiny little buttons on. And I had one of these HP, it wasn't the 35, but it was one of the scientific ones with logarithms and everything. And I didn't know what half the buttons
Oh,
did, but it just looked so cool.
it came with a book that was literally twice the size of the calculator, and it took forever to understand how to use it. So just going back to listening to you about your own endeavors to creating your comic book, I certainly started, it's funny actually, I'd forgotten all about it. When I was younger, what I used to do, I used to put together a report on movies coming out. So I would, so it's just funny how, what you and I do, you can still take it back to your childhood. So my parents would buy the newspapers, and in the newspapers there would be adverts, sometime even the poster, but a very, very small one in black and white of movies. I would cut that and then glue them on a piece of paper and then literally make up a story, because I didn't know, for example, what the movie Alien was about. But I would write a short synopsis and I would give it to my neighbors to read. But with regard to the calculators, so I think I had one called Casio, or Casio, maybe it's pronounced, when I was near the last year for my A-levels or baccalaureate. And like you had blue, orange, green buttons. You could do so many different things. But by the time you learned how to use the calculator, you probably should have just studied and do it manually.
Exactly, absolutely. So funny. And as always, Pascal, we owe a massive debt to these people in the past who have endeavored to bring these apps and these gadgets and these technologies to the world, because we rely upon them so much. So this is our way of saying thank you to the pioneers and to the inventors and to those people who've shaped the world that we live in today. Pascal, let's move on now. Let's bring ourselves back into the present. Let's move on to our creator shout-outs. So, Pascal, who are you giving a shout-out to this week?
Oh, I am utterly delighted to introduce you, our viewers and listeners, to Claire Downham. Claire Downham is based in New York. She's a coach, consultant, and speaker about self-confidence. She's also known as the Queen of Calm with her client, and she's heading the program, The Antidote of Self-Development. But the reason why she's in today's shout-out is because she's the host of the daily, I do mean daily, LinkedIn Live. Every morning at 7:45, she's doing a quarter of an hour series called the Calmcast. And I have to tell you, it's really quite extraordinary. Two things: the dedication, you know that all too well, and the discipline to go live daily to bring value to her community, but also the delivery, the way in which she's gone about it. So when you discover the post, because I think she's very happy for people to watch it on replay, start their day with her kind of discussions, her questioning, a kind of reflection on the number of things that could get in the way of your own development, your own kind of level of positive energy, and so on and so forth. And she's introducing the show, really, I would call it that, as a time to be calm and think clearly before the day takes over with everything that we have to deal with. So this element of the commitment to the community. There's also the structure. So you have, to begin with, quite a lengthy written post to accompany the live video, which I think shows, again, a lot of thinking behind it. And everything starts, as you would appreciate it, Roger, with a question, which is very intriguing. And then you feel compelled, of course, to watch it. And I'm going to also suggest to you that we can learn a lot from Claire in terms of her delivery, in terms of the way she controls her voice. And clearly she has studied and perfected her public speaking, because it is really, really a delight. And it all works together. It's like the whole package. But you have questions like, have you ever contemplated how much you have learnt in life? ? And then you're drawn into her discussion. How much time do you spend thinking about your thinking? Are you perfect? How much do you use the word should? And so it goes on. So she's really on this journey of exploration. She's sharing what she's understood to date. She's sharing, obviously, advice on how you can, really bring more calm and clarity into your life. And once again, I am so impressed with that commitment to the daily LinkedIn Live and the way in which she's kind of structured everything. I should have checked, and I will ask her whether the sessions are available as a podcast, but that would be just an amazing way to listen to on your way to work, or if you're doing something else, because once again, what she says and how she says it is such an experience. So Claire Danham, Queen of Calm from York.
That really is commitment. That's so, so good. My shout out is a gentleman called David 𝗲𝗏. Now, I've known David for many, many years. If you go to his website, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, he describes himself as a journalist, author, speaker, and trainer. Now, I first met David as a journalist when I was working in financial services many, many years ago. But he's also been on the Marketing and Finance podcast, actually talking about presentation skills, because he's also a speaker, but he also trains people in presentation techniques. So he's got quite a few strings to his bow. But what I like about David's website, and particularly his blog, which is why I'm giving him a shout out today, is that for me, he's often a voice of reason within the media. Now, of course, at the moment, we've got all this polarizing debates about everything: Brexit, the pandemic, whether Boris should resign or not, blah, blah, blah. And there's so much media hysteria around. And quite often, David will just put something up on his blog which sets out the facts, has a reasoned debate about it, and draws a usually pretty convincing conclusion. And I almost feel sometimes that it's like a little bit of an oasis in the media desert, if that's not a bad analogy. So check it out. It's a little bit different. David 𝗲𝗏 is also a really good trainer, and if you're looking to develop your presentation skills, you should look at him for that. But this shout out is more about his blog, and I think he really is the voice of reason.
Smashing. So we'll have voice of reason and the voice of calm together.
Absolutely.
Today.
All right, Pascal, it's time to move on to the film marketing section. And boy, have we got a film to talk about this week. Well, Pascal, this is only the second time in Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast where we've actually talked about and reviewed a film which we haven't actually seen yet. And I think the first one was way back in episode 2 when we talked about No Time to Die. Now, of course, we talked about No Time to Die again last week, having finally seen the film after its many, many delays. But this week, we're going to be talking about the latest film in the Scream franchise. Now, it's just called Scream, but it's actually the 5th film. So whether it should be called Scream 5 is probably something that we should talk about today. But before we talk about anything, let's dive straight into the trailer.
There's certain rules to surviving. Believe me, I know. They always come back. The killer is a part of something in the past. This one just feels different.
You're all in danger.
Mom? Where?
Sydney.
I've seen this movie before.
Not this movie.
You said we were gonna finish this. Go finish it, Sydney.
Scream.
I'll be right back.
He's dead.
Wow, that's how you cut a trailer, Roger. Oh, goodness.
I mean, immediately you know it's part of the franchise. All the iconic things are in there. The shadow mask and everything like that. The old characters, the new characters, the way the setup is played through. Obviously, we haven't seen this film yet. It's only been out for about a week. We'll be going to see it as soon as we can. But it definitely sucks you in, doesn't it? But is it Scream or is it Scream 5?
So let's deal with that. So the filmmakers and producers saying it's a reboot. But then again, it's a direct sequel to Scream 4 that was actually released 10 years ago, give or take, Roger. Just as a reminder, Wes Craven, who left us in 2015, created the Scream franchise with the first one in 96. And it's funny because in 96, when he came out, there was almost two things going on. They had the fans who couldn't wait to go and see the movies, and the critics saying Wes Craven's too old to make films like this and to hold an audience, and they were so wrong. So the filmmakers want it to be called Scream. They want to retain that. But everybody's saying Scream 5 because it is literally the fifth chapter. But do you think it's a marketing decision to avoid using the number so that it doesn't devalue the brand, I suppose, or the desire to go and see the film?
I'm not sure it would affect me at all. But then I'm of the age that we saw the originals way back. We saw number 4, as you say, was 10 years ago. So we've been aware of the franchise over its 2 decades or so, maybe 25 years now. But I guess younger people who maybe don't know the franchise or haven't discovered it yet, it's probably not going to make any difference to them. And possibly, if they saw a title that said Scream 5, it might put them off going because they think, well, I've not seen the first 4. So by just calling it Scream, then it removes potentially a barrier. I'm not sure it would affect me at all in my decision to go to see it, but I have the benefit of knowing about the franchise. So maybe that was the logic behind it.
Sure, and you mentioned there's only a week of its release at the time of recording this podcast, and so far I've kept away, because I didn't want to get any spoilers. But both critics and fans are absolutely loving this chapter and installment of the Scream franchise. So we're going to talk about the marketing, and we're going to talk particularly about the social media marketing, which has been the focus of their campaign. But before we do so, I wanted to ask you very quickly. They sadly had to cancel the premiere that was scheduled for the 11th of January, the movie being released on the 14th, pretty much around the world. Do you think that was a big miss, the premiere being cancelled, or do you think movies can do without?
I guess the movies can do without it, because ultimately something as powerful a franchise as this is going to get bums on seats, whether or not, isn't it? But what they will miss out on is the media coverage of the big event. When there is a premiere, you will always get the shots of the stars having their interviews. They'll be very interested in what the ladies' dresses look like, and they'll be very interested in the director and the actors and the musicians and everything together. And I guess without that media spotlight, it does feel as if something's missing, but I'm not sure it will actually affect the viewing figures.
So one thing that I think is working really well for the Scream franchise, I would argue probably the best loved slasher horror movie franchise of all times, and I think people do credit Wes Craven for that, is that there you've got the main kind of baddie, Ghostface, with that mask that has become so iconic. And I would say it's the second iconic character that Wes Craven's given to us after Freddy Krueger. But then we've come to really, really root for Sidney Prescott and Gail Weathers, and to a point, Dewey Riley, who has gone through his own journey as a character. So we're back, supporting them in their kind of once again encounter against Ghostface, and having to guess, who's behind the mask. But what they've done is, back to this idea, is it a reboot? Is it a sequel? Even from the poster design, the poster that for Scream 5 is very, very different to the previous 4. And it's not just a time thing, and 10 years is a long time, and trends and style do change. But for me, it does feel like they're trying to say, it's called Scream, by the way, there's no number 5 on the poster. And the design is very, very different. If you had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this one next to it, it's a striking difference, isn't it?
Yes, and it looks very much like a Netflix cover to me. A lot of Netflix things that advertise their shows tends to have the entire cast on the picture, doesn't it? And that's what they've got here. Having said that, there is the very clever line that says the killer is on this poster, which of course is absolutely... Does that actually mean that the killer is on this poster as in Ghostface, which is on the poster obviously, or is it that one of the characters that's on the poster is actually masquerading as Ghostface, is actually the killer? So we'll have to wait until we see the film to answer that question. But I thought that was quite clever, and that means that they had to put the entire cast on the poster in order to use that line, I guess.
And what is interesting, the Scream franchise has also been successful because of the combination of scares with humor and satire, which is what Wes Craven was being praised for. And what we'll see in a moment is the whole marketing campaign plays on that humor. And sometimes it's actually the killer who's addressing you via social media. Sometimes it's the characters. And, for me, I'm also looking at this poster thinking there'd be fans who've studied it, looking for Easter eggs or even little nods to other horror movies, because the whole thing about Scream is that the difference with other horror movies, you and I've sometimes joked about it, the characters know about horror movies, they know about the rules, they kind of understand that they are working within the set kind of protocols, and therefore they try and survive and or find the killer, knowing the rules of horror movies. Whereas in sometimes people, that could watch a film and think, well, surely you know how to kill a werewolf. You've not watched movies before. And I think that's why it is lovely. And of course, the whole premise of, do you like scary movie? What is your favorite scary movie? And all those things. But that poster, I think, is going to get people talking for quite some time. But just in terms of chronology, very quickly, this movie was pretty much produced in and around 2019. There was a desire, certainly, for them to be released in 2021. In line with the 25th anniversary of the first one. They couldn't do that because of COVID. So on the 12th of October, we had our first official trailer, which was very, very good indeed. And there was just nothing much until really, and then suddenly it just completely got on overdrive on social media, which has been really the most surprising thing for me. It's surprising, Roger, because you and I have agreed that whilst what we're going to discuss in a moment is a very, very good social media campaign, you and I have seen none of it.
That was so surprising for me as well, because you said to us, let's talk about Scream, because the social media campaign is being heralded as one of the best ever. And I just don't genuinely recall seeing anything. And that's really bizarre, because you and I are always talking about films in our social media posts, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, even on LinkedIn. I mention films, and we mention films in our posts for this podcast as well. So you would think that the algorithms out there would have picked up on the fact that we are film buffs. But the algorithm has chosen, for whatever reason, to exclude us from this campaign for Scream. So, they've, even though it's a fabulous campaign, and we're going to talk about it in a few moments, as you say, they've perhaps not got the algorithm, perhaps hasn't got the targeting right, and that's a real shame.
A real shame, because we missed some really entertaining and inspiring, because a reminder for all of us, we use this segment of the show as a source of inspiration for our own content creation efforts. I discovered, this is how bizarre this is all this. I discovered about the cleverness and impact of the social media campaign on a social media website, praising the campaign called Social Media Today, but not via, let's say, a film-based stream. So very quickly, the chronology of the typical marketing pack. So we have the teaser poster, we had the first trailer on the 12th of October. On the 7th of January of this year, there was a featurette with Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette talking about the returning to Woodsboro. And on the 9th of January, which is only a few days ago, very clever actually. That was maybe instead of the premiere, the actors, not Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Neve Campbell, went on the Drew Barrymore TV show. Now, if you're a fan of Scream, you realize how important that is, because Drew Barrymore was indeed the first victim on the very first Scream chapter all those years ago.
Yes, that was really good, wasn't it? I saw that and thought it was funny.
And then we had the final trailer on the 11th of January, which is when I rediscovered Scream via social media today. So it's kind of bizarre. So they went ahead with Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, of course, but also Discord. I think this is the first time that I found myself mentioning Discord on film marketing, and the whole social media campaign that we're going to go kind of, Roger and I, step by step, had the hashtag Scream Movie, Scream, and Ghostface. And it all begins, as far as I can tell, from the research that we've done, really in September, following a year of teaser content that it would be essentially expected. It all begins really cleverly on the 27th of September with the launch of the Woodsboro Horror Film Club on Facebook, hosted by actors, you could argue, but characters in the universe of Scream, Sarah and Ash, who use Facebook and TikTok to talk about how exciting they are to see the latest Scream movie, but also talking about Stab and all the different elements of the universe. And certainly you have two campaigns, Roger. You have the normal Scream social media campaign, and you have the, let's go, fictional campaign with the Woodsboro, which is not a real town as far as I know, Horror Film Club.
Yeah, it's very good. It's almost making reality out of the scenario, isn't it? And I guess that's, to me, that's absolutely what Scream's about, because as you said before, we know the rules of horror films, and they talk about the rules of horror films within the film. So it's very inclusive, isn't it? We're all in on the joke. We all know what the rules are. And this social media campaign, even right from the very start, made you part of it. It brings you into it. It brings you into the narrative. And that's, I think, why, even right from the start, it became so powerful.
And we'll come back to Sarah and Ash, because since they live in the Scream universe, you can kind of guess that perhaps things are not going to go so well for them. But I'm just going to wrap up September, and then you can take over October, Roger. On the 29th of September, there was a competition with Airbnb where you could win a one-night stay at the original Scream house, whereby you would even potentially get a call from Ghostface and perhaps play a horror movie quiz.
My goodness, that would be quite scary, wouldn't it? Actually, to do that. Moving into October, then they had a competition to win tickets to go to your local 25th anniversary celebratory event and watch the original Scream with other fans. So they're making sure that you effectively swat up on what's gone before in order to prepare you for the latest one. Then, of course, in October, 12th of October, the official trailer was released, Paramount channel. The 12th of October, still the first artificial reality experience. Feel what it's like behind the mask with the new Ghostface filter. Again, that's quite cool, isn't it? You can actually feel what it's like to be Ghostface. They didn't give you an actual play knife to play with, or a rubber knife or something like that. But you can imagine what it would be like to be wearing the mask. Further on into October, Ghostface voice filter was added to TikTok. Now, TikTok is massive, isn't it, Pascal? So, of course, it would feature in any social media campaign. And closing off October, they obviously cashed in on the massive thing that Halloween is in the States particularly, but also across the world. Show me what you're wearing for Halloween using the hashtag #ScreamCostume. And of course, I bet that hashtag absolutely trended across the Halloween night.
They actually did an enormous amount of fan content sharing on Twitter. It was really, really quite something. As part of this research, actually, Instagram was a bit easier to use just as a learning point. To going back to November, so November was focused on lots and lots of teaser videos, primarily Square, just as a footnote. But it was focused on Ghostface, scaring the new characters, and some many different renditions using voice as well as text animation of Hello Sydney. And fans could also send their own creation in terms of poster design, and there was some really amazing artwork out there inspired by horror movies. And if you're again a horror fan, which I think was all about, you had some 70s horror movies style of the design, you had 80s and 90s. Just very quickly then, starting with December, it all kicks off on the 13th of December with the 12 Screams for the holidays, introduced by Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox in a video. And what they say is over the next 12 days, every day we're going to drop some content on the socials that is going to be pretty exciting. And sometimes it was very simple, Roger, from an exclusive poster design. Some of it is absolutely amazing, and asking you to vote using the poster again that you mentioned, who's Ghostface, to some very highly impressive endeavor. So on the 20th of December, you could watch the 1996 Scream movie whilst receiving live via Messenger some quizzes and some facts about the movie in partnership with Movie Mate, which is, again, I'm so disappointed. I would have wanted to do that.
Yeah, all of these things. I mean, this is a massive and impressive list of things that were happening, and I didn't see any of it. So the algorithm must genuinely not like me, or the algorithm just genuinely just doesn't understand me. But we had,
but yeah, go on.
we had lemon cakes. The lemon cakes recipe from the 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗸𝗲 Sheriff Department. That was on the 22nd of December. On the 24th of December, unlock the new Scream movie AR lens and I'll pay you a visit. Tag @ScreamMovies and share your videos using Ghostface's watching so I can see your creations. See again how inclusive this is. It's asking people to take part. And Scream was always an inclusive movie. Even with the Stab film was the film within the film.
That's right.
That's bringing people in. It's all about inclusiveness.
So then we move on to Christmas Day itself. You could argue maybe the last of the 12 Screams of Christmas.
Yes.
And on the social media, you have almost like a hand-drawn or hand-painted traditional Christmas card. And at first you kind of go, okay, I can see, greetings. You see hints of 𝗧𝗵𝗲, you see hints of the knife and so on. But then if you're not careful, you can miss. There's a QR code in the bottom right-hand corner. If you scan the QR code with your mobile phone, it takes you to a video message from Sarah, one of the hosts of the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Horror Film Club, and she's going to a Scream party. She's complained that she's not heard from Ash for 3 days. She knows that people are worried about her. She said, don't you worry, I'm going to this party, it's all fine. And then something happens, whether she drops the phone or she's attacked. But what I can say is that we've not heard from Sarah since Christmas.
Moving straight into this year, we had a special cereal tie-in, cereals that you have for breakfast, your favourite cereal killer. Buy a collector's box of strawberries and cream cereals from 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏
actually on this one, the Ask Me Anything session on Discord with the Blood Makers and head of makeup and makeup effects, which I think is lovely. On the 11th of January, merely days away from the release, the Scream soundtrack is released on Spotify. Quick mention of Brian Tyler, one of my favorite music composer for that genre of horror and action. And then a day before the release on the 14th of January, they invite you to play the online video game, Can You Survive the Scream House? Essentially combining a tour where you click on different kind of arrows and move around the original Scream House with a quiz. It begins actually, Roger, with a text message from Sydney, but in fact you've been kind of trapped in the house with Ghostface, and if you don't answer the questions properly, Ghostface will get you.
And of course, when the film was actually launched, they still want people to take part. So again, they're saying, if you're seeing the film this weekend, send a photograph of you from the theatre using the hashtag #SeeScream and tag @ScreamMovies. And again, people from all over the world are sending in the pictures. Some of them are wearing the Ghostface mask, some of them aren't, some of them are in front of the poster, some of them are in front of the theatre. Again, it's getting people to take part. So yes, maybe, Pascal, this was one of the best social media campaigns ever for a movie.
And you know, the fact that it has been complemented by professionals working in social media, not film magazines or not film fans like you and I, two things. It means that you and I are doing the right thing with regard to this podcast by including film marketing, where people are saying, look at what the Scream franchise has done. We can learn from this. Yeah. But it also makes me feel so disappointed that I missed out on all the fun.
Absolutely right. So we're going to have to, I wish we could meet the algorithm. I wish the algorithm was a real person rather than this black magic box that sits somewhere in hyperspace or something. It was a real person. You could go up to it and grab it by the scruff of the neck and say, we didn't see any of the Scream social media stuff and we're film geeks. Why? And see how he would have whittled his way out of it.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. And I will say, for a film that you and I have not seen yet, we've been able to cover a lot of the marketing, but actually it's to the credit of the marketers themselves, because it was so easy to follow and so compelling to go through a chronology of, all right, it all kickstarted in September of last year, and you follow through the journey of execution. And I think it's going to be one of the best film marketing segment for quite some time.
Yeah, and of course, what it really does mean now, Pascal, is that we need to get out there and see this film, because we've got so excited about it and we haven't even seen it yet. So I think we need to get out there and see it as soon as possible. Thank you, everybody, once again for watching or listening to Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure spending time with Pascal talking about our favourite subjects once again. Please do, as always, subscribe, leave us comments, either leave us comments on the YouTube channel or get in touch with us on Twitter or the other socials. Until the next episode, please go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.